Hi, this is Jay Early, and this is the first video in this series on the power of parts work. This video was on understanding your parts. And okay, so when you're feeling bad or acting in a problematic way, like if you're feeling depressed, or if you're procrastinating, or if you're getting too angry, or you don't have enough intimacy in your relationship, or you're shy, or you feel low self-esteem, or lots of other things, learn what we're going to do in this video is learn what might be causing this, and learn about a new effective way to understand your mind so that you can make the changes that you want to make. So let's look at a few examples. So Joe occasionally blows up at his wife Maureen over little things. She becomes frightened and hurt, not surprisingly, and then afterwards he feels terrible about himself. And he says, how could I have done such a thing? I don't want to hurt her. I wasn't being myself. And he judges himself harshly, but you know what? It doesn't really change his behavior. It keeps happening. And then here's Meg. When she's having a bad day, she can just stuff herself with dessert. And she isn't even exactly paying attention to what she's doing while she's doing that. But afterwards, she feels ashamed of herself, and she says, I'm trying to lose weight, and this just makes matters worse. What was I doing? And then there's Sandy, who wants to work on a new video project, which is kind of an exciting thing for her and creative, and might get her more out, out in the world and seen and known. But instead of working on a video project, she ends up getting busy with other things, cooking a meal, cleaning up. And after a few days of this, she realizes that she's procrastinating. She's avoiding the video project. So these are all different ways that people can have behavior that isn't what you want, or feelings that don't feel like you. So what is going on here? So, in fact, of course, we're all occasionally troubled by behavior, emotions, or impulses that we don't understand. And what do we usually do? We judge our emotions. We try to fight our impulses. We make resolutions to change our behavior. But in many cases, none of these work for very long. And what are usual methods of change that come from kinds of therapy or other kinds of work? Change your faulty thinking. Well, yes, we do have faulty thinking, but there's something deeper than that, and changing your faulty thinking usually doesn't really deal with the core of the problem. Or sometimes you try to overpower your inner critic, or ignore your depressed part, or fight against your shy part, but that doesn't really work for very long. Or you might try to get insight into the childhood origins behind these things. And of course, that's important. These things do come from our childhood, but insight by itself often doesn't lead to real change. It's an important part, but it's not enough. Then there's also methods where you release painful emotions through catharsis. And this can have some good effects, but it tends to bypass defenses, which can then later sabotage your work. And often it brings temporary relief, but maybe not the really fundamental change that you want. So I'm going to talk about a new, not entirely new, but an upcoming way of understanding yourself that really leads to powerful change. And basically, it's a way of understanding that our minds, our psyches, as consisting of different parts, which are sometimes called subpersonalities. And these are actually almost like little people inside us. Each part has its own feelings, its own motivations, its own beliefs, and so on. And our minds are actually a complex system of interacting parts. And working with our minds this way, working with parts, gives us enormous power for change, as I'm going to be demonstrating in these videos. So let's go back to that last person, Sandy, that we're talking about. So remember that she got busy doing other things rather than working on the video project that she really wanted to be doing, or that she, yeah. And so when she started exploring using this parts understanding, she realized that there was a part of her that wanted to avoid working on the video project. Even though Sandy wanted to do it, there was a part of her that didn't. And so she called it the busy part, because the busy part caused Sandy to get busy with doing anything but the video project. But of course, this, until Sandy explored inside, all of this was unconscious. So Sandy didn't know what was going on. All she knew was she wasn't doing the project, and instead she was doing all these other things. So as Sandy kept exploring, she discovered another part of her that was a child part that was sort of stuck back in childhood, in a number of situations in which this child part was ridiculed by other kids. And so it turns out that Sandy's busy part was trying to protect the embarrassed child part by avoiding anything that it feared would lead to more ridicule, including the video project, because the video project would have made Sandy probably more visible and out there. And this part was afraid that that would lead to being ridiculed, because that's what happened when Sandy was a kid. And then as she got further into it, she realized she had a third part. It wasn't just that she didn't do the video. There was a part of her that really was trying to get Sandy to do the video, and it was judging her and saying, what's the matter with you that you keep avoiding, and you're stupid, and calling her names and pushing her and judging her and making her feel bad about herself. And of course, this part of her, the pushy, critical part, was fighting against the busy part around whether Sandy was going to do the video or not. And of course, until she started, as I mentioned before, until she started exploring this, this was kind of all mostly unconscious. So here's the three. Of course, these are only three of many parts. We all have more than three parts, but these are the parts of Sandy's that were involved in this particular issue around the video project. So there have been, over the years, many different forms of therapy and personal growth work that have worked with parts. Jungian analysis was probably the first, and then psychosynthesis and Gestalt therapy in the middle of the 20th century, and also transactional analysis at about that same time, are all different ways of working with their parts. And then more recently, there's voice dialogue and ego state therapy, and one of the most recent, and to my mind, the most powerful and comprehensive system for working with parts is internal family systems therapy, IFS, which is what I do and what I teach. And what I'm going to show you in the rest of this video and the others, how IFS is a really powerful way of working with parts. So IFS was developed by Richard Schwartz. It's user-friendly. People find it very easy to get the concepts and work with their parts, and it's very, very powerful and effective in making change. It's non-pathologizing. It doesn't treat you as having something wrong with you. It's just having parts that aren't functioning the way you'd like. It's spiritually oriented. It's also very effective at working with trauma, as well as lots of other things, as we'll see. And so now let's look at some of the core concepts in IFS. There are two main types of parts. There are protectors, which are basically equivalent to what you might think of as defenses. They're parts that manage our interactions with the world to avoid feeling emotional pain. They defend against underlying pain that we carry, try to keep us from feeling it. And they also try to, as I said, manage our interactions so we don't get hurt. And each protector has a positive intent. It's trying to protect you from getting hurt or from feeling pain, even though the actual impact of the protector is to cause problems for you, like Sandy's busy part, or Joe's anger, or Meg's eating. Those are all examples of protectors. And here's many more: being a people pleaser, having an inner critic, being overly intellectual, being controlling, fogging out, and on and on. There's many, many different types of protectors. And then the other major type of part in IFS is the exile. And exile is a wounded inner child part that carries pain or negative beliefs that are left over from early childhood situations, that, let's say, where you were made to feel shame or guilt, or where you were abandoned, or something happened that terrorized you, or where you felt worthless, or you were dominated or abused, or got a lot of anger thrown at you, so you ended up being afraid of anger. These are all examples of exiles, and you can probably imagine many others. Now, the other core important thing in IFS is the self. And this is not a part, it's your true self. You might think of it as your spiritual center. The self is the agent of healing in IFS. You can actually learn to access yourself and work with each of your parts from yourself. And the self is also the leader of your internal system of parts. It's the part of you, ideally, that makes choices, takes actions in the world in a healthy way. And the self has all these qualities. It's caring, it's compassionate, for both toward other people and towards your own parts. It's openly curious towards your parts. It's a place of calm, courage, clarity, creativity, and so on. And then one more thing about parts that's useful to know, and that is when we have inner conflict, when we're torn in two different directions about what to do, as Sandy was about her video project, it's because two parts of yours are polarized with each other, which means they're fighting each other to determine your behavior. So in Sandy's case, her busy part and her pushy critical part were polarized about working on the video project. Okay, so that's the end of this video. In the next video in the series, which you should get in a couple days, you'll learn about the power of parts, how you can actually, this is just the understanding of the psyche, but now we're going to talk about the actual step-by-step IFS process for how you make change so that you can heal your childhood wounds and transform your behavior.